On paper, a PS5 Pro seems inevitable. At this point in the PS4's life, it was starting to run out of steam. A mid-gen refresh seemed like a nice upgrade. But the PS5 is a different story. We're 4 years into the life of this thing, and it doesn't feel like anyone's really taking advantage of it yet. And there's a lot of games still coming out for last-gen systems. Like Metaphor ReFantazio looks really good. I really enjoyed the demo. It's also on PS4. The PS5 is obviously a big upgrade from the last generation, but PS4 and Xbox One are still clearly capable machines, so we end up in a situation where the cross-gen period is going for basically the whole generation. People don't want to give up the old consoles because there's not enough to play on the new ones that are only on the new ones. And just how much people are holding on to their PS4s is pretty indicative of how a PS5 Pro is unnecessary. Graphics have gotten good enough for most people. As long as it runs at least a stable 30 FPS and doesn't look like complete ass, most people don't care past that. So when a PS5 Pro was actually revealed, it makes sense why most people immediately lost interest. They showed us better graphics, but it's genuinely hard to tell the difference in a lot of cases. Like, if you need a detailed side-by-side comparison to understand why this is so much better, that's a problem. They show this distant tower building thing in Last of Us 2. I mean, I can see a difference, but if it was being pointed out by this side-by-side comparison, I probably wouldn't have noticed. Or the
parade scene from Ratchet and Clank.
As Mark Cerny puts it, I can barely see a difference, honestly. Yeah, it looks better, but it's not enough to noticeably improve the experience. And honestly, the Spider-Man 2 comparison might as well be the same picture. The trees are less blurry, I guess. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is like the only game with noticeable improvements, and PlayStation didn't even show it off themselves. They were just like, hey, Digital Foundry, do it for us. Cool. Apparently the image quality and performance mode wasn't the best in that game. The PS5 Pro has this built-in AI upscaler called PSSR, or PISR as I like to call it. It's basically their own equivalent to DLSS on NVIDIA GPUs. Now, DLSS only works on NVIDIA hardware because it has parts to speed up the machine learning stuff. My computer has an AMD GPU, so I've never been able to use it, but it's a pretty much universally praised feature. AI is shoved into a lot of places where it shouldn't belong, but this is absolutely one of the best uses of it. Being able to run at a lower resolution that's then upscaled to increase performance is super useful. It even looks better than native resolution in a lot of cases due to having its own inherent anti-aliasing. This is a very good thing to have, and I'd be shocked if Switch 2 didn't have DLSS in some form. But even then, spending extra $200 just for one game to look a little better isn't worth it. Yeah, this thing costs $700, but you probably already knew that by now. But wait, it actually costs $780 because the disc drive is being sold separately. Like, these people have the balls to be like, hey guys, this is $700. Also, this stand is sold separately for an extra $30, and also it doesn't have a disc drive by default. This price is genuinely astonishing to me. Like, the base console still costs $500. The price never went down, at least in the US. In most places, the price has actually gone up over time. This is the only console in history, as far as I know, to actually be more expensive than it was at launch. What? The reason why this thing is so expensive is probably to provide a no-compromise experience, because apparently 75% of PS5 players play on performance mode, which is a really interesting metric, and it lines up with basically everyone I know. Like, why would you play on quality mode? There's no reason to. Graphics have gotten so good that I'd rather the game looks worse but plays better. But even then, I can't really tell that much of a difference with quality mode. Like, despite it being the option that's supposed to look better, performance mode is usually the better looking one to me because the frame rate is immediately noticeable. Is it because I'm playing at 1080p? I mean, I doubt it. I play games at 1440p on PC, then look at the game on my 1080p monitor instead, and it looks basically the same to me. I mean, obviously, like, 1440p does look better than 1080p, but, like, not by, like, a huge amount. Like, if I had to play at 1080p, like, I'm not really gonna complain about that, especially when it's on a 1080p screen. And, like, honestly, I'm sure a ton of people feel the same way. Odds are that last 25% is made up of people who didn't know the game had a performance mode. So, yeah, let's play devil's advocate for a bit. Let's say this thing has to be $780. With how expensive all the parts are, let's say they can't make this any cheaper. This is not greed. It has to be this expensive. Is it still worth releasing at all? Honestly, I don't really think so. Like, there's nothing here that noticeably improves the gameplay for most people. There's no real reason to buy it over the base system. It's really making me worried for the next generation of consoles. If this half step was this small of an upgrade, this next system probably won't be that big of an improvement either. Is it going to be $700 too? Because I'm not paying that much for a lockdown device that can only play games. Like, sure, I'd pay that much for a good computer, but that's a computer. I don't use my computer just for games. I use it for basically everything. Writing, video editing, image editing, programming, video streaming, emulators that make this thing play way more games than just Steam. You name it, really. My PlayStation can just play PlayStation games, use streaming apps, and play Blu-rays. Like, that's good, but not $700 good. Even $500 is pushing it. Honestly, I really have to wonder if they just made this to make GTA 6 play better. They can use it in advertisements that PlayStation's the best place to play it, and they wouldn't be wrong. I think PS5 Pro is gonna be a Wii U situation. It does well at first since all the enthusiasts buy it up, but then it just sits on store shelves because barely anyone wants it. Like, even with the GTA scenario, I think the conversation is gonna be like, hey, what's the best way to play GTA 6? Then they see the price tag, ask if there's anything cheaper, then they get the base PS5 instead. Or maybe a Series S, if it's even gonna have a Series S port. Because honestly, this game is gonna be so big that Rockstar could probably be like, hey, we're not gonna make a Series S version. Suffer. And Microsoft wouldn't be able to say no because they would lose a lot of money otherwise. Obviously, the PS5 Pro is supposed to be an enthusiast device. It's not meant to replace the base system, but if the discourse around this thing so far is anything to go by, the enthusiasts don't want it either. So they essentially just made a console for no one. I don't really understand why this exists. Like, if it was priced more reasonably compared to the base model, I'd get it. Spend an extra $100 to $250, get a slightly better experience. But $780 is too much for a box that mainly just plays games. And this is coming from someone who is the target audience for this thing. Honestly, I'd just prefer if they made games look worse to target 60 FPS by default instead. We have the numbers. Sony has said it themselves. People prefer it. So why not try to design games around that? The base console clearly has the hardware budget. You're allowed to spend your money however you want. But if you spend the extra $280 on this thing, you deserve to be made fun of. I'm sorry, it's the truth. Anyway, it's been fun. Take care, everyone.